In this video, we're going to check out the software behind me and show you how to make good code. So when you are creating your software app, iOS app, Android app, or whatever it may be, your code's actually good. What I'm going to show in this video is how we approach logic when it comes to code. So this specific software, you provide a YouTube URL, you get timestamps out. But there's a lot of nuance associated with that, a lot of if else. So let's go over that. Welcome back, y'all. In this video, I want to go over some logic here that's very important when communicating between the front end, the back end, and even the back end uses this logic as well. This is all through code. The idea is this, though. Let's do a couple error checks here. So, for example, user comes to the software, puts in random string, invalid YouTube URL. I can't click it. This is a good way to circumnavigate calls to the back end. Let's try another thing here. Let's assume that I do put in a URL. It loads up my video perfectly, and I can generate timestamps. But what's really happening here is that we're doing a couple checks. The first check we're doing is seeing if this video is over 2 hours long. If it's over 2 hours long, we won't accept it. So when I put in a video that is too long, this one being 3 hours and 44 minutes long, we get an error of 2 hours per video. So in this video, let's check out all these different little airflow logics so we can ensure that when we create our application, we give guardrails to our application. Because the idea is simply this. We have our app. In our app, we provide value. And when approaching this value, we got to give guardrails to the end user, as we don't want them to, one, abuse our function, two, use our function in a way that could actually cause it to not work at all, give the user a bad feedback experience when the UI is just like, I have no clue what's happening. And finally, this sets up guardrails where the application knows how to interact with every possible scenario that could occur. So let me take a step back so this isn't that confusing. Let's go to the code. Side note, the code is open source. Description down below. Created a whole series on this. That 3 hour, 44 minute video was us creating the software that you're seeing today. Description down below. So if I come to the code here and I move my face and I go to where this logic's occurring, which is timestamp comp and timestamp.js, let's scroll down a little. So what is occurring when the user first puts in the URL is that we're doing a YouTube API call. This is how we get the data of the thumbnail, duration, title. And what you notice is that we're doing a bunch of if statements here. So here's the first if statement. If the length, which is the returned length from the data received from YouTube API, and length in this context means duration of video, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, we are going to exit out of the logic to allow the user to go any further. That's what a return statement does here. And essentially what it's saying is that if the seconds is less than the max duration seconds, and if you're like, Corbin, how do you know where to set these? You can hit Command F, Control F, and this is going to take you where it's being set. So here, what you'll notice is that this logic sets it to 2 hours. And then in addition, what you'll notice is that we have a boolean down here. Boolean is true or false. And what you'll see here is set duration exceeded is true. And then we're setting the duration message. The duration message is set at the top of the file as well. So coming up here, this is the duration message. Timestamp allows for a max 2 hour per video, as we saw before. But notice this. Look at all these different error messages we have. This is what I want you to learn from this video. When you set up whatever logic you're setting up, you're going to have a bunch of fail-safes for it to know how to interact when errors occur. So a couple of these fail-safes I have is auth message. So when the user goes to the website, but it's recognized as a bot and they try to use the website, it says, hey, hold up. You don't seem like you're authenticated. Authenticated in this context means this is a real person and they should be able to use the website. Another one could be a privacy message. YouTube video is not publicly visible. We can't process private or unlisted videos. Therefore, coming over here, if I put in a private or unlisted video, we would see the error message here. So how do we translate this so you can start using this in AI coding? There's going to be 2 ways to do this. We got 1, 2, 1, and 2 for my Deutsch viewers. And the first thing you want to do is going to be test, and test. So testing. What you'll realize is that you're not going to be perfect the first go when understanding what error messages will occur. Therefore, when you are testing, the best way to test is what we call console logs. So simply talk to your AI chatbot, and for any function you're doing, ask for a console log. Console log in this context allows the user, or you, the developer, to hit right-click, inspect, come up here, hit console, and these are the messages we'll see from the front-end code. And this is how we communicate when there are errors, they'll show up here. So what you need to understand when writing good code is it's always a good idea, and even high-level software engineers do this. Some of my acquaintances that work at big companies, I mean, console logs is the cheese, right? You want extra cheese on your grilled cheese. I like grilled cheese. But the idea is you want to add as many console logs as possible when developing more complex code, especially when working with third-party APIs like YouTube API. as this will give you the most context with what is happening when an error shows. So what I do in my context is that I know, for example, it grabs the YouTube API data. So coming down here, notice this. If the privacy status does not equal public, it's not publicly available, it returned a data of private or unlisted from the YouTube API call, then look at, I'm setting it to the privacy message again, and I'm exiting it out of the logic with this return statement. This isn't as simple as, hey, I connected to YouTube's API, I throw in a link, let's have fun. You will notice that every function that you typically do in code, you're going to have a bunch of different paths. So leading back here, we have our main function here, the timestamp one, so we'll time stamp, we'll just do time. And when handling this code, success is, okay, everything looks good. The YT video is good to go, but errors are going to occur. So what you want to do is almost in your mental mind, or you could draw it out, understand where the errors are happening. And there's going to be multiple paths this could go down to, right? So one path in my context is that the duration is too long. Another one is that it is a private video. So we'll do P for private. In addition, another one for me is that captions don't even exist for the video, or the video is not fully processed by YouTube, so we'll do Y, or just overall general error message. Now, here is why this is fundamental when writing good code. If you don't give these alternative paths and you write the code where it only assume success, you're going to find yourself where your front end is just going to break and you're going to get like a infinite load situation. That's why here is another piece of terminology you can use when coding with AI. Always set up catch and error statements. Catch statements are going to fire off when it attempts something. So we like to call them try and catches. I guess that's just how the code is written, but try and catch, right? So in my context for the YouTube API, it's going to try to get the data for the YouTube API, see if it's all good. If an error incurs, we're going to catch that error and then interact with it. Now use this terminology in those prompts. When setting up a function, say I want try and catch statements, add console logs, and this will be good code when building out through the vibe. Now, the second part here that I was referencing is just deeper understanding of what you're trying to achieve. When I say deeper understanding of what you're trying to achieve, this is aligned with the API that you're connecting with. Whether this is going to be your fundamental architecture, like your Firebase backend, AWS backend, you kind of know how to connect those and the typical errors that are associated with that. But one real example here could be if you're connecting to OpenAI's ChatGPT completion request. So here is a rule of thumb. If you're like, Corbin, this sounds like a good idea. I know I need more try-catch logic, just overall logic when it comes to paths. But honestly, I have no clue what I'm even looking for. Go to the relevant API documentation you're connecting with. So as I referenced before, this would be the chat completion request. And what you'll notice is that typically in API documentation, it will also reference what happens if there's an error. So for example, you go to the API documentation, usually you just type in error, and right here we got error codes. These are very common error codes in software development, and they kind of map to all types of different types of apps, right? So for example, a 401 invalid authentication, same thing happens in Stripe, but the idea is this. At a baseline, all your logic should take into account these different error codes so you know how to interact with them. So for example, if for some reason you got invalid authentication, which I highly doubt you would get this because you would just put your correct key and everything should be fine. But in theory, if you did, know how to reflect this in the front end. Maybe a better example of this is like a 429, because this could actually happen to a user, which means you exceeded your quota when it came to chat completion requests or any type of API with OpenAI specifically. If you receive a 429, this will be communicated back to you in your application. Now, typically, if you set up none of those paths, like a try or catch, that 429 is going to incur and your application is going to break. But if you recognize that a 429 can possibly incur, then you set up the logic to handle that within the code. Simply talking to Cursor, Windsurf, VS Code, AI, whatever, just an AI chatbot, you can simply put, I need to handle error logic for 429 errors, give the relevant documentation here, and then handle that error in the front end. So at least you can communicate to the user. You get a little drop down tab that we saw over here. Hey, right now there is a high usage, try again in 5 minutes. This is the workflow. When an error occurs, you want to reflect it in the front end to give some communication to the user. Now, I know you've seen this in any type of application, whether you're using ChatGPT and you've hit a random error. Sometimes you ask ChatGPT a question and it's just like a little error message, like try again or something like that. That's their way of handling error logic, and that's their way of writing good code. So that covers a fundamental thing you should know when developing apps, which is Know how to reflect situations that can occur in the front end to the user for a good user experience. And more importantly, because I've seen this in my past softwares I've developed, if you don't add that try and catch, or you don't give the app a way to interact specifically with certain types of errors, at least a general one, your app will just break. You'll get infinite loads and the page just won't work. So as a rule of thumb, be as specific as possible. But if you can't be that specific because you're just like, I don't know what I'm doing, or like I'm kind of lost, at least add a general error logic so it knows how to interact. The one thing about software is it's quite literally 1 + 1 = 2. If you do 1 + 1.1 = 2, it's cooked. So keep that in mind. Make sure to leave a like. It is completely free. I'll make sure to leave everything I reference in the description down below. Go and click it. Make sure to subscribe as well. I already know 4/5 of you haven't subscribed. That's my statistics. 20% of you have, so kudos to you. I'll see you in the next error logic